Now, are you ready to soak in some more inspiration to take another step towards being a better you?
Yes.
Doesn't sound like it.
Yes.
Yes? Great. So we have a trailblazing speaking session as we introduce to you Mahalakshmi, an investment professional at Prime Ventures Partners, a venture capital fund. She worked with and continues to work with entrepreneurs and startups right from 40-day company to a 100 crore plus company. As an ex-entrepreneur herself, she knows how difficult it is to take the unconventional path. And now, she wants to make life easier for anyone who decides to be an entrepreneur. She also runs an Instagram channel to achieve this purpose where she shares her knowledge about startups, entrepreneurship and venture capital. Can we hear it from Mahalakshmi?
Hey guys, thanks Aditi for that wonderful introduction. I'm Mahalakshmi and like Aditi said, I am a chartered accountant and I work in venture capital. Shark Tank we were talking about before, I basically do what the sharks do. I look at startups and pick the ones that are worth investing in. I also run an Instagram channel where I talk about startups and venture capital. We'll get more into my story later, but first I want all of you to take a nice hard look at this graph. I'm going to give you a few seconds. This is not a finance lesson, don't worry, no business case study. But we will talk about money because who doesn't want to make more money, right? So here I have plotted the earnings of 3 different people that I personally know. Very real people, real numbers, nothing here is hypothetical, right? The red one that you see is one of my friends. She was a brilliant student in school and college, always the topper, and she got a degree, a very sought after, difficult to get degree, and then she decided to join a corporate. So as you can see, year 1, she's doing better than the other 2, started off really well, and then she had a very stable growth, very templated, yearly increments, and that is how her path looked like. The second one that you see, the light green one, is one of my friends that decided to join a startup as an employee. Again, started off a little bit lower, and as you can see, as he goes up with startups, what happens is once a startup starts to raise funding, that is when the employee salaries really pick up and they exceed the salaries of people that work in corporates, right? And the third one is a friend of mine who decided to build his own startup. And with him, the thing is, you can see how steep the curve went, and it doesn't end there, right? The upside for a startup founder is limitless. So we don't even know where the graph is going to stop. Now, what we as women have been taught is that the red line that you see, that is the only definition of success. I don't know if you can relate to this, but even from Richa's story that we just heard, right? All of us are told that study and find a job, a stable, secure job that will give you this stability. That is what I've been told. Is that what you guys have been told as well? Right? Yeah. And as a result, what we do, we close off our brains to these green possibilities, to the possibilities that can actually give you those non-linear returns. We are completely closed off to these possibilities. I was too, and I had to learn the hard way, but we'll get more into that later. Now, I want to discuss 3 different stories with you. Yeah, so these are some of the founders that I work with. The company is called The Soul Store. So Vedant and Aditya, the 2 guys, right after college took up an entry-level job that you get in college placements, and they worked there for a year or so, and they were very unhappy with their job. So they decided to quit and start their own company, right? And just want to put it out there, these guys were not privileged in any way. They weren't born with a silver spoon, and very typical middle-class family. So they really did something unconventional, right? And last year, the company made 150 crore in revenue, and they raised 240 crore from venture capital and angel investors. And interestingly, the founders, in the beginning, the couple of years when they just started the company, they couldn't sustain themselves, right? So they were doing part-time jobs. Every week, for a few hours, they were working at Professors, they were doing freelancing, and they were using that money to fund their startup. And after a few years, when they could show some numbers and raise funding, that was when they raised funding, right? And my favorite part about this whole thing, sorry, one back. They did all of this selling t-shirts. They didn't try to send a rocket to the moon. They didn't do anything to do with AI, new technology, nothing. They were selling t-shirts. Isn't that crazy? And
They really have a good stuff.
they do. Yeah, please check out the Soul Store. So, next one. The second one is this guy. He joined Swiggy as a head of operations in 2015, very early, right? Swiggy was founded in 2014 and they raised their first round of funding in 2015, which was when this really young guy joined them as head of operations. Before joining Swiggy, all he had was 2 years work experience as an engineer, right? And after joining Swiggy, you can see he is now the head of Instamart. He is still in his early to mid 30s and he's handling an entire department, Instamart, entire product, not just department, right? And this is how it works in startups. Initially, 10 to 15% of equity in startups is put aside for early employees. And first 15 to 20 employees take like a big chunk of these ESOPs, right? So you get anywhere between 0.1% to 1% of the company as ESOPs when you join a startup. So even if we assume the lowest, if this guy got 0.1% ESOPs, Swiggy today is worth 5.5 billion after the valuation has been slashed recently. So this guy has created $5.5 million of wealth for himself in 5 years. And again, just want to reiterate, he is just in his early or mid 30s, right? Next one, I'm sure very familiar face, all of you know him, right? Sharan Hegde, he runs this content channel called Finance with Sharan, everybody loves him. He gets paid 8 lakh per reel. One reel is a 60 to 90 second video. He acts out, he has a skit, and he explains finance concepts. He gets paid 8 lakh for one reel. And what did he do before this? He was an engineer, went to a very normal engineering college, worked as an analyst in Big 4 for a year, and then he just started creating content, right? Now, I want to ask you guys, all these 3 stories, very different from each other, different things they've done, they've come from different walks of life. What do you think is the one common thing in all of these stories?
Wealth creation.
Okay.
Risk taking. Risk taking.
Exactly, that was the exact word that I was looking for. One word, 4 letters, and the word is risk. All 3 of them decided to take risk. That is the first step and the most important step, right? Quitting a very secure job to start selling t-shirts, I think nobody can argue that that's an insane risk, right? And people tell me, entrepreneurship is not everyone's cup of tea. Fine, I get that. You can also work at a startup. That is also risk-taking. Startups, layoffs in startups are very common, and if the startup doesn't work out, it's going to shut in 2 years. You would have done nothing in your career for 2 years, right? That is also a risk. And let's say some people can't do that either. You have financial commitments, you have obligations, working in a startup might not be for you. The last example that we saw, content creation. Every content creator starts off with a full-time job and then content creation on the side. There's no excuse to that, right? So what I'm trying to say here is, taking risk doesn't have one single definition. Taking a risk does not mean quitting your job today and building your startup tomorrow. It comes in different colors, different ways, and all we need to do right now is stay open to the possibility of having different definitions of success and stop looking at risk as a bad thing. It is only when you take risk that you find those non-linear outcomes, right? So another question that a lot of people might ask is, what has gender got to do with this? Any middle class family is going to tell their kids, male, female, anyone, to not take a risk, to go for a stable job. I can tell you from my very real on-ground experiences, I talk to entrepreneurs every day, and slowly I'm starting to speak to male entrepreneurs that come from very unprivileged backgrounds, from tier 3, tier 4 locations, from villages, from no-name colleges, trying to build a startup and reaching out to us for funding, right? This is not happening with women, unfortunately. First of all, the number of women I see, if I speak to 80, 90 entrepreneurs every month, I speak to 1 or 2 women entrepreneurs, and these entrepreneurs come from really privileged backgrounds. So, what I'm trying to get to here is that the ability to take risk imbibing that in ourselves and in the next generation, it's not happening fast enough for women the way it's happening for men. And that is something we all need to consciously work towards. I made this an important aspect for me because of my personal story. I started my journey off by doing my CA. I was told that it's the most safe option, it's the most safe thing that you can do, very templated, and while I had other interests that I wanted to explore, I decided to listen to everybody around me and I started doing my CA. 1 or 2 years into the process, I realized that it was not for me. I struggled. I think the 3 years where I did my articleship, which is an internship in CA, were some of the worst years of my life. I was borderline depressed, because of which I gained 15 kgs in a year. I got PCOD, and it was crazy, right? I don't know, like looking back to that time. And that was when I realized that the biggest risk you can take is really not taking any risk. It's listening to what people have done for thousands of years before you and will do for thousands of years after you without thinking what it is that you really want. So once I finished my CA, I decided to quit. It was not for me, and I built my own startup. It was called Fitly. It's a fitness app, and this came with its own challenges, right? Building a startup is supposed to be an exciting, fun journey. It's supposed to be full of adventure, ups and downs, you're learning so much. It's supposed to be a positive experience, but it was not for me. I was constantly scared, afraid, and anxious about what is going to happen next. Is this going to fail? Where am I going to make money from? And this is not how an entrepreneur's life is supposed to be, right? And this actually happened, right? I was at a family function and someone asked me, what are you doing? And I told them, oh, I'm building a startup. And they said, the exact words, they said, if you're going to aim too high, you're going to fall too hard. So just do what is within your capabilities. This was said to a 22-year-old that was trying to build their own startup. And this was what I wanted to stop, which is when I decided to work in venture capital. I don't look at venture capital as just a finance job. What I think it is doing is telling people that, listen, if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to be someone that wants to change the world, you shouldn't have to worry about things like what if you fail, how are you going to pay your bills, how are you going to survive. And that is where venture capital comes in. That's where we tell you, we will give you the money, we will help you build your company, and this is what you need to do. And that is what really stuck with me, and I work in venture capital now. On the side, I also create content to make life easy for anyone who wants to start up. So on Instagram, I share tips on how you can build your startup, how you can raise funding, what it takes to build your business model, and things like that. And what I really want to leave you with here today is 2 things, right? First of all, us as people should start embracing risk if we want those non-linear returns. If you're going to do things that everybody has always done, you will always be that linear standard graph, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, sure, but if that's what you're looking for, great. And the second thing that I want to leave you all with is we need to start building an ecosystem, especially for women, where failure is accepted and even encouraged. We need to tell people, especially the next generation, that it is okay to fail as long as you're trying. So yeah, that's my story, that's what I do here, and you can reach out to me on Instagram, that's me. I'd love to chat with all of you entrepreneurs doing something new, discussing ideas, anything, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mahalakshmi, for allowing us to learn from your experience and ocean of knowledge. We definitely have a lot to take away from this evening. Am I right, ladies?
Yes.
Well, then why don't we give her a huge round of applause?